cover story celebrating Watermark's 30 years. It is our current temporary exhibition. It was actually brought to our attention that Watermark was celebrating their 30th anniversary this year, which is actually a pretty significant feat for a local independent magazine to achieve that milestone. And so we actually thought that it was a really important story to tell and just to highlight and celebrate that on Watermark's behalf.
I would describe Watermark as the voice of this community. And it's one of the great things about Watermark, and I say this all the time. Watermark is the voice of this community by this community. If you look through our pages, it is mostly all representative of the different factions of this community. I think the initial goal for Watermark when it was launched was to connect the community. You know, that was the main goal. And I know Tom will probably talk about this a lot too, but he wanted to show our community and the straight community that the LGBTQ plus life could be a rich life.
I would say the primary impact of Watermark on our own community, the LGBT community, is we, within the pages of the newspaper, we painted a very positive, uplifting image of what it was like to be gay, be lesbian, and in time to be transgender. Rather than being defined by other media, we were defining ourselves in a very sort of positive way, showing all the different opportunities for cultural outreach, for athletic outreach, just all the different things that our community is. And I think that was, and I know because people have told me that picking up Watermark and reading it every 2 weeks over the years, especially back in the 90s and the early 2000s, really impacted the way people thought about their lives.
I think much of that remains the same. I mean, I think it has changed a little. I think when he started it, that world was mostly, gay men and lesbians. And I think that as our community grows and we get into transgender, non-binary, and all the other stripes on the flag, I think that goal that he originally had remains. It's to connect that community, to give a voice to that community, and to make that community visible for the rest of the world.
When I initially started Watermark, it's kind of an interesting story. I was up in Atlanta in a restaurant having lunch in the Virginia Highlands neighborhood, and they happened to deliver Southern Voice, which is Atlanta's LGBT newspaper, while I was having lunch. And I picked one up, and I saw other people picking them up and reading them, and it was and is a really great paper. And I just thought, you know what? I think Orlando's ready for this. Paint the picture of what the LGBT community was like and what it's like to be a gay and lesbian in Central Florida. I think the biggest challenge was that I was underfunded. I knew very little about starting a company, and I was able to raise some money with some friends and some prominent people in the LGBT community, but just enough to hire a creative director and an advertising sales director. And then I served as the editor and actually wrote a significant amount of the paper for the first, couple years. Pulling it all together, I was doing it on top of being an attorney and having my own practice. So the biggest challenge was just, it took a lot of time. There were many 36-hour shifts there that first 3-4 months getting issues out. And, that was the biggest challenge. But at the same time, I have to say it was very exciting.
Personally, for me, Watermark is everything. I first met Tom Dyer when I might have been 19 years old. So I was in college, but I was coming back. I was part of the Delta Youth Alliance, and he was a mentor of that organization. And he left the organization to start Watermark. I remember the meeting where he's like, "This is my last meeting, and if any of you are interested in volunteering or helping, we could use some help. I'm going to start this newspaper." I went back to school. Years later, moved back to Orlando, and was just looking for work, had completely forgotten that Tom started this newspaper called Watermark, and I was at, I forget the name of that bar. Oh, such a great bar. But I was sitting at a bar and I picked up a copy of the paper and they were hiring. So I applied, walked into that office and saw Tom, and we were both just like, oh, it's you. And I'm like, hey, it's you, this is great. And it was this great reunion. And I knew from that moment I was in a good place, you know, and that I was home. As far as the impact that it has here locally or statewide, you know, you can just see by the numbers and the growth that we have helped build this community. Watermark does, and it's what does it isn't like necessarily like Watermark. It's the community that does it. It's the community stories, and one of the main things that we do that I love is we become the history of this community through the stories that we tell, and you can tell that through this exhibit by just looking at the walls. This exhibit is so important to me on a personal level, and I hear this from everybody that I've been at this exhibit with, is they look at especially this wall of covers, where we've got our very first cover and it goes all the way down to the 30-year anniversary cover, is that I see the last 30 years of my life. You know, I always say I can look at this and say I know exactly where I was, you know, with Matthew Shepard, 9/11, when ODA helped change the city's ordinance on LGBTQ rights, you know, all the way down through Ryan Key Skipper when Charlie Crist apologized to the community for his behavior when he was governor, to marriage equality, the murders of trans women of color in Jacksonville, like all of it. I know exactly, like this whole wall is the history of my life. That's what's beautiful about Watermark, right? Is that the history of Watermark is the history of all of our lives.
One of the things that is key for us in our mission here at the History Center is celebrating local stories and local history, and making people realize why local history is relevant and how local history fits in with national history, with what's going on nationally and globally. And so I think that this exhibit is a great example of that, because you see through these 30 covers the progression of LGBTQ plus history, not just here in Orlando, but nationally. So for example, you see in the first cover, they feature Amanda Bierce, who was the openly gay actress who played Marcy Darcy on Married with Children. That issue came out in the aftermath, in the wake of the fallout from Ellen DeGeneres coming out as openly gay on her series. And so it really mimics what's going on in the world. You see how the local community responded to 9/11. You see progression of history, and you see the increase in visibility of transgender people. You see all of these things through those 30 covers. This exhibit originally was intended to be a very small display in our lobby. And one of our staff members knew that Watermark's 30th anniversary was coming up, and so he sort of brought it to me, and I was like, yeah, let's have a meeting. We should do something for it. We thought we were gonna do maybe 200 square feet on a wall. And so we met with Rick Todd, and he talked about some of the covers and how they wanted to feature covers. And so I had him send me what he thought were like their most significant, impactful covers. He ended up sending me 28, and he told me, choose whatever few you think will work, because we had a limited space we were working with. And when I saw all 28, I then made the decision that, like, no, this needs to be a full gallery exhibit, because once you actually see the progression and how these covers tell the story, and how you can actually trace the history of the LGBTQ community over these last 30 years, I felt like it really warranted fuller exploration. For this exhibit, since the focal point is really the titles, we wanted to sort of give people a foundation with the timeline, so they sort of understood the impact that Watermark had. We started with the timeline as being the first thing you enter into, and then you can see a wall of the logos that Watermark has had throughout the years. They've changed their logo, they've changed with the times, and you can sort of see the progression of how styles have changed. And then you get to the covers, which are really the focal point of the exhibit. And so from that, you are sort of seeing the main thing that we want to highlight, which is that they've told these stories, and these are some of the stories that they've told. And then from there, you sort of get to a reflection area of the exhibit where you can see the photographs of all the work that they have done in this community and building community. You can sit and you can actually read the 30th copy, the 30th anniversary edition of the magazine. So we just sort of thought about, in terms of the visitor experience, how do you put the covers, which is the focal point and the thing that we really want people to come away with, how do you make that sort of the apex of the exhibit? How do you build that foundation first? And then how do you resolve it? And how do you give people time to reflect?
People who haven't heard of Watermark, I would tell them that it is the story of our community by our community. It's, pick it up, read it, learn about the people in your community. It's the only newspaper, right? I always say this too. It's the only news source that is going to talk to you about when the gay chorus has an audition, or when somebody, a volunteer for an organization, wins an award or something like that. Other media will cover important, like what they consider important LGBTQ issues, but we will cover all aspects of it all the time, year round, and that's what's important, and that's why Watermark needs the support of its community as much as the community needs us to be telling the stories. I hope Watermark's legacy is that it was instrumental in building community. Community means everything to us at Watermark. We do what we do because we love this community. And it's not, no one's getting rich off of a local niche market newspaper. So when we write these stories and when you see us out at all the events that a small staff of people can go to, it is because we are passionate about this community. And I hope that people see that.
Well, I think Watermark's legacy will be as a vehicle that came along just at the right time in the early 1990s to paint a positive picture and a positive portrait of the local LGBT community. And I think Watermark's legacy is that we embraced that mission and did a good job of it, to the extent that it changed not only our own impression of what our lives are, but also, the political community, the cultural community. I think we did a really good job of letting people know that the LGBT community is a very, very important, rich part of Central Florida.